Um, we all know that cerebellum has got two hemisphere and a midline vermis portion. Both the hemisphere and the vermis, they have got a superior surface and inferior surface separated by horizontal fissure. And if I take this both, if I keep my both the hands like this, just to imagine these are superior aspect and these are inferior aspect of the cerebellum, and at the horizontal fissure, if you separate them like this, like that, and this is how it looks like. Understand? So these are midline vermal portion and vermis, and these are lateral hemispheric portion. And when you look at the vermis, vermis has got a different segments, and each segment of the vermis has got its lateral extension in the hemisphere. So each one has got their own name. I'm not going to stress upon that. So but there are some part which we will take it, and those parts will help us to classify the cerebellum into lobes. Now look at the first topmost part of the vermis that come under the superior vermis, that is the lingula, and the lowermost part of the vermal segment is called as nodule, and this nodule is connected to flocculus. Flocculus means tuft of wool, so like a small tuft of wool. So the flocculus is connected to the nodule by means of a peduncle. This flocculonodular lobe is separated from the rest of the part of the cerebellum, what we call corpus cerebelli, by a fissure called as posterolateral fissure. So posterolateral fissure separates the corpus cerebelli from the flocculonodular lobe. Now let us come to this corpus cerebelli, the main mass of the cerebellum, and it is separated into two lobes, anterior lobe and posterior lobe, by means of a fissure which you can see here, and this fissure is called as primary fissure. Primary fissure present on the superior aspect of the cerebellum, separating the anterior lobe from the posterior lobe. Okay, and now and here this is a horizontal fissure. Horizontal fissure separates the superior aspect from the inferior aspect of the cerebellum, whereas primary fissure separates the anterior lobe from the posterior lobe. So anatomically right now here we got anterior lobe and posterior lobe. Posterior lobe is the largest one. Okay, both are separate, both the lobes are separated by the primary fissure, and the smallest one, that is the flocculonodular lobe, that is separated from the corpus cerebelli, that is separated from the posterior lobe by posterolateral fissure. We got three anatomical subdivisions of the cerebellum, that is anterior lobe, posterior lobe, which are the larger one, and the small flocculonodular lobe. Now let me go a little bit more detail and look at the vermal segment. The first topmost part of the superior vermis, that is the lingula, okay, which actually strictly speaking anatomically belongs to anterior lobe. Now phylogenetically, when I divide the cerebellum, this lingula, the lingula which comes along with the flocculonodular lobe, lingula comes along with the flocculonodular lobe phylogenetically. Okay, yeah. So similar to that, when you go to the anterior lobe except lingula, take that anterior lobe without lingula, and to that anterior lobe add two segments of the inferior vermis, that is pyramid and uvula. So anterior lobe without lingula along with the pyramid and uvula, they come under the one more group of classification. And look at all these, the larger part of the posterior lobe, the complete posterior lobe without pyramid and uvula, that come under the one more classification. Now let me write that all the three classification what I said, and this classification what I am talking, it is phylogenetically like dividing the cerebellum into three groups. Now, after this anatomically, when after classification, now let me stress upon the phylogenetical classification. See here, the flocculonodular lobe along with the lingula that come under the archicerebellum. Archicerebellum is a cerebellum is the oldest part of the cerebellum, they say, and actually the meaning of the archi, we all know that beginning. So archicerebellum is the phylogenetical subdivision of the cerebellum where flocculonodular lobe and lingula comes under that. Now after the archicerebellum, the next one, the anterior lobe along with the pyramid and uvula, that come under paleocerebellum. And paleo means ancient. And last, the largest subdivision, that is a posterior lobe without pyramid and uvula, that is the neocerebellum. Neo means new. So let me write that three phylogenetical classification here. So two types of classification here it is there in front of us. One is anatomical, one phylogenetical classification. Now let us talk about the functional subdivision of the cerebellum. Functional in the sense based on their neuronal connections as well as the function. So when I think about the archicerebellum, that which involves the flocculonodular lobe, most importantly, this part of the cerebellum, it is called as vestibulocerebellum because it has got a efferent and as well as efferent connection with the vestibular system. When I say vestibular system, it is the vestibular nuclei of the brainstem, and it also has got efferent information which are coming from the primary vestibular organ of the inner ear. So in the form of the primary vestibular organ of the inner ear, they send the sensory information which are concerned with the orientation of the head in relation to the gravity and the changes of the head position. All these informations are conveyed by the primary, the axons of the vestibular nerve directly from the inner ear. So since this archi and flocculonodular lobe, what I am talking, since it is mainly connected to the vestibular nuclei and the vestibular nerve, this part of the cerebellum functionally come under vestibulocerebellum. Now, let us talk about the important connections of the anterior lobe where it comes nothing but paleocerebellum. So anterior lobe and paleocerebellum, it is called as spinocerebellum. The reason why it is called as spinocerebellum because it receives proprioceptive informations from the muscles, tendons, ligaments, and even from the skin. So from all joints, muscles, tendons, ligaments, and from the skin, the proprioceptive informations are coming to the anterior lobe and paleocerebellum via spinocerebellar tract. If I recollect those spinocerebellar tract, it is anterior spinocerebellar tract, posterior spinocerebellar tract, cuneo-cerebellar tract, rostral spinocerebellar tract, and trigeminocerebellar tract. So anterior and posterior spinocerebellar, cuneo-cerebellar, rostral spinocerebellar, and trigeminocerebellar. These tracts conveys the proprioceptive information from the muscle, tendons, ligaments and the joints, mainly via spinal cord. So that's why this part of the cerebellum is called as spinocerebellum. Now, posterior lobe without the pyramid and uvula. The posterior lobe is the largest portion, I can say, forming the majority of the lateral hemispheric part. And this posterior lobe is the neocerebellum. And when you think about the connection of this posterior lobe and neocerebellum, they have got a major connection with the cerebral cortex. The motor cortex, the primary motor cortex, the premotor cortex and even the somatosensory cortex of the cerebrum, it has got a connection with the neocerebellum. That's why this part of the cerebellum is classified, come under the group of cerebrocerebellum. When you look at this, the complete classification of the cerebellum, the first classification was anatomical, then phylogenetical, then functional. That functional vestibulospino and cerebrocerebellum, which we got it by understanding, by thinking about their connection. Okay. Then the last one here, I just made this statement complete by writing the corresponding nuclei, deep cerebellar nuclei, which are connected to that archean, paleo and neocerebellum. Look at here. The fastigious nucleus is connected to archicerebellum. The nucleus interpositus, nothing but globose and emboliform, they are connected to the paleocerebellum, mainly to the anterior lobe, and the neocerebellum, the larger part, the posterior lobe, neocerebellum, it is, when you think about its connection, it is most importantly, it is connected to dentate nucleus. Dentate belongs to neocerebellum, nucleus interpositus belongs to paleocerebellum, and fastigious nucleus belongs to archicerebellum.